Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our November 3rd Thursday. My name is Sam Clement. I'm the President and CEO of the Michigan Association of Broadcasters. We really appreciate you joining us today as we have some great guests from the National Association of Broadcasters who are going to give us a sneak peek on the key issues that are happening now and also look ahead to the 2024 election cycle. We have a great panel of guests today. Sean Donnellan is the Executive Vice President of Government Relations for the NAB. Jack Smedley is the Senior Vice President of Government Relations, and Shar Stanberry is the Vice President of Government Relations. And they have a number of topics that they will touch on today, go through a presentation, and we'll answer your questions as they go through. Feel free to put those questions in the chat, and Sean and the team will answer them as they come in. As always, we will have time for questions at the end of the session. So with that said, it is my honor to welcome Sean to lead the conversation. Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam, and happy Thursday to everyone listening and watching. With me, Char Stanberry from our government relations team, who principally works with House Democrats and was a previous chief of staff for a member of Congress on the Energy and Commerce Committee from New York. Jack Smedley principally works with Republicans, both sides of the chamber. Been with NAB for 10 years, and before that was a senator's key telecom and committee staffer on the Senate Commerce Committee. So we have a diversity of backgrounds here and different perspectives that we're going to share. Just to preview for folks, we're going to go through pretty quick election outlook and overview covering both chambers of Congress and the presidency. We're not going to make any bold bets or predictions here on some of the most significant of those races, but that is going to set a foundation for us then talking about what the potential alignment in Washington may be in the next Congress and how that can really impact broadcasters' policy agenda and some of our both threats and opportunities. So as Sam said, please do put things in the chat if you have questions along the way, and we'll either handle it in real time or as we get to a couple of those natural breaks. So let me get us started here. Okay, the current Congress, just to level set, obviously there is a very narrow Republican majority in the House of Representatives. There are a couple of vacancies at this second. Look no further than a recent change in the speakership, as well as the events of trying to elect Kevin McCarthy as Speaker to start this Congress, to really demonstrate a lack of, I would say, a governing majority for Republicans with that narrow margin of 221 to 212. Over in the Senate, similarly narrow, but held by the Democrats. So they have a 51-49 majority in the Senate. And we're going to flag here just for you to be thinking about a number of toss-up races and leaning races. We're going to go through these a little bit more because many of these are also presidential swing states. But just to set the predicate here, this is really a Republican favorable Senate map, and Democrats are on defense in that chamber. All right, so Dems must get 5 seats or net 5 seats to gain the majority of the House. Republicans only need to net 2 or 1 if they win the White House to control that chamber. And again, you look at the number of Democratic seats up 23, Republican seats 11. And when we get into those, you'll see why Democrats are on defense in the Senate. We're already seeing some retirements. This last speakership process in the House, I think, frustrated many. We saw tempers boil over this week. And so one member of Congress who sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee, Republican Debbie Lesko from Arizona, declared in one of these contentious conference, closed door meetings, hey, I'm not coming back. This place is completely broken. So we'll see. I think the betting money is that trend will continue. We also, of course, saw Senator Manchin from West Virginia announce that he would not be seeking re-election as well. So these will likely tick up, and we'll go through it a little bit more as well. All right, so let's go to the big ticket here and start with the incumbent President Biden's approval rating. When we put together this deck, this was a stat from November 7th. So I'll give that caveat and also just say this presidential is unprecedented, except for the last time these two likely nominees face each other. But even in these 4 years, there's a lot to unpack, a lot of things we've never seen before. So President Biden's approval rating, 38.9%. Again, that was November 7th. President Trump's is sitting at, former President Trump's is sitting at 40%. So that's a pretty unique proposition. You can see incumbent Trump, incumbent Obama, incumbent GW, incumbent Clinton all had higher approval ratings. And the trend here was every time, it basically declined. And the commentary was, how could this person be reelected? This is very precarious. And so you can see how that has impacted, in many instances, control of the Congress as well. So I mentioned the swing states. This is some polling, again, end of October, beginning of November, but it has former President Trump leading Biden in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania. Biden is up in Wisconsin, but folks may have seen, the White House has a set of sort of talking points and messaging about this, which is, it's fine, the president's going to get there, nothing to see here, the economy is getting better. But you've seen a few folks, David Axelrod, one, said earlier this week, over the weekend, it's time for the president either to get going or get out. So I think there is some real concern about the state of his campaign. So the major trends, here's some of it, a deeper dive. President Biden is doing worse with some key demographics, Black voters, Latino voters, young voters, than in 2020. So, that is margins that he's going to have to really work to build back up. And then here's a poll on what I think is obvious to anyone paying attention, concern about the age of the president. 71% of voters think Biden is too old to be effective. Few of the issues, who would do a better job on what? Trump gets the edge on the economy, immigration, national security, the Israel-Palestine conflict, whereas Biden takes the edge on abortion, democracy. Some of these trends played out in last week's state-based elections as well. So the president and his advisors and surrogates are saying, well, the economy is going to get better. He's going to get credit for it. But as of the start of this month, how would you rate the nation's economic conditions? On net, 19% said good, 81% said fair or poor. That is problematic. There's obviously been major market news this week and reports both on inflation decreasing, but also some consumer spending being pulled back. So a lot of runway here, but this is a major issue, as we know, and one that is not cutting in the president's favor right now. So against that backdrop, let's go over to the Senate. I mentioned the number of seats that are up for each party. The Democrats are on defense. when we first made this deck, to be honest, Senator Manchin from West Virginia was on it. He's now not running again. So the most competitive seats are those in Arizona and Ohio, currently held by Senator Sinema and Brown. There are no toss-up seats held by Republicans. We then look at competitive seats, those that lean one way or the other. Again, no Republicans defending seats like that. There's an open seat in Michigan. Senator Tester, Rosen, Casey, and Baldwin in Montana, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Again, those correlate with swing states and the presidential. And of course, I mentioned Manchin. That is now, according to pundits, a likely flip and pickup for Republicans. Here's some polling in these races. I'll go through Michigan since Sam is our host. We've got, Slotkin basically leading any of the potential Republicans. You can see, Senator Casey well ahead of McCormick in Pennsylvania. These are currently favoring the incumbents, more or less, with one major exception. Again, that's Arizona, where Senator Sinema is going to face a primary against Ruben Gallego, sitting congressman, and Kari Lake is in the race on the Republican side, though previously, I won't say failed, but a candidate who's lost statewide previously. Flipping over to the House, Republicans are defending more seats. There's no doubt about that. There have been a few sort of wrinkles here. And one of the benefits and tailwinds for Republicans is basically netting seats through the redistricting process. So this math looks like they're on the defense, but it's not as sort of as bad as at first glance. We look at these really competitive seats in the House. I'm not going to go through them all, but 9 Dem toss-up seats, 15 Republican Dem toss-up seats, and take this in conjunction with this slide, which shows there are more Dem lean seats that they're defending as compared to Republican seats. So it's pretty close, and it's already a fairly close Congress as well. Breaking news today, the House Ethics Committee has come out with a report, an investigation into Congressman Santos. He's announced as a result of that, he's not going to run again. We'll see if he can make it to the end of this Congress. I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion and perhaps another attempt to remove him following Thanksgiving. And then again for Sam, Congressman Kildee, Michigan 8, announced he was not going to run again. So these are the toughest races. Favors Democrats, but fairly close. And again, here are some of these redistricting pickups where state legislatures have, I'll use the word, gerrymandered their state lines in their favor.
Hey, Sean, can you back up to the slide?
Say that again.
You back up to the top of the slide. You back up. I'm just asking in the chat for that. This one. Nope. Sorry. Go back to the House. And just a note on the Republican side toss up, there's 2 states that are very heavily spending those Republicans had a good night almost 2 years ago last month, and a nonpartisan which changed again. Yeah. Well, good. Thanks, Ron.
Yep. And sorry, folks. I was trying to text Jack. That came through a little bit funny on my sound. Not sure if other folks had that. We'll maybe check on that. All right, so here are the kind of the summary takeaways, because I just threw a lot of data at you. The trends. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but Republicans are odds-on favorite to retake and win the Senate, and the House is very close. We say here a coin flip, and neither party is expected to win the filibuster-proof majority of the Senate. So again, either way this goes, likely to be pretty narrowly divided chambers of Congress. A lot of these toss-up races, history shows, they tend to break one way on election day. So we'll spare you from getting into all of these individual races, but know that they could definitely swing if we have a wave turnout. And obviously, or a wave election in a presidential year, there's higher turnout expected. Both Biden and Trump are unpopular. That seems to be an understatement, but maybe politely put there. And look, Democrats performed well in recent elections, and we saw that over the abortion issue in particular. And then, typically, incumbent president's reelection effort is viewed as a referendum, but because of Donald Trump's, I'll say, persona, it's really, Democrats' agenda here, or the president's agenda, to make this not a referendum on him, but a choice between Biden versus Trump. And obviously, he won round one of that choice election. So against that backdrop, we're going to go through what it could mean for broadcasters. Sorry, I see we got some chats. Oh, we went back. All right, we already accomplished that. Thank you, Jack. So I'm going to bring in my colleagues here. Char, if the House flips and Democrats regain control of that, we just had obviously a lot of attention and controversy around Republican House leadership, but remind us where things stand with the Democratic caucus.
Absolutely. So, in the instance that the House flips, the House Democrats have already done their generational change. So currently, the big three that we have now include Hakeem Jeffries from New York, Catherine Clark from Massachusetts, and then also Pete Aguilar from California. So you will see those three assume the big three roles, with Hakeem Jeffries becoming the first Black speaker of the House if the House changes.
All right. And Jack, you want to handle what could happen in a Republican House? I mean, we got to get there first.
Yeah, and cut me off if my mic is cutting out again. Sorry about that.
That sounds perfect.
The better. Okay. To your point, we lasted 9 months, which, depending on who you talk to, was either ridiculously long or ridiculously short for the Kevin McCarthy speakership, by virtue of having 15 ballots. This is how it started. Speaker Johnson seems to be getting a little bit of a honeymoon. He did pass a CR, which is effectively what started the end of the McCarthy speakership, passing a CR about 10 weeks ago. So he seems to be getting through this okay. They've teed up a January and February deadline for the next spending bills. So it does not sound like he will get any grace to do another CR. It kind of feels like those are pretty hard deadlines. And if they are not met, or they can't succeed in passing actual firm bills to the end of the fiscal year, then they're going to have an issue. What we saw during this round of figuring out the new speaker was about 4 or 5 other people went for it and did not get it. And they ended up with Mike Johnson, who most people on this call probably had never heard of before he became the speaker, or at least didn't know much about. After him, either you can go back and try again if they do vacate him again, or if he decides to step down with someone who failed. But I think it's if you don't go back to Tom Emmer or Mike or Steve Scalise or even Jim Jordan, I think it's kind of slim pickings to figure out who would be next after him. So I think their hope is they get it through this Congress with this speakership and this leadership team intact, and kind of, to Char's point, see what happens. It'll be if the House does flip, typically, although recent history is kind of the exception, but typically the speaker doesn't come back. So that kind of makes it easier for Republican leadership. But we shall see.
All right, Jack, I'm going to keep you on the hot seat.
Yep.
Senator McConnell has had a couple of health episodes caught on camera. He's released, a doctor's note essentially saying he's fine, but there's definitely sort of speculation in Washington as to who could succeed Mitch McConnell as Senate Republican leader. Don't want you to opine on McConnell's health or tenure, but who's kind of waiting in the wings if that should materialize in the next Congress?
Yeah, it's the exact question everyone keeps talking about in kind of parlors. It's the short answer is it's the three Johns, or door number 4, and those three Johns are Senator John Thune, who's the current whip, Senator Senator Thune's from South Dakota, Senator John Cornyn, who is the previous whip from Texas, and then Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming, who's the conference chair, who's the third ranking member of leadership. Those three are in a polite way jockeying for it, knowing they don't want to step on Leader McConnell's toes by doing that, but he's kind of giving them the high sign that that's fine. And then there's always the potential door number 4. The issue with leadership elections in the Senate specifically is it is an incredibly closely guarded vote who you voted for. If the Senate flips, that's 51, maybe 52, but let's say it's 51 members of the Senate conference, the Republican conference, who would vote. You need 26 of them, and it's a secret ballot. So these personal relationships are very telling. And most of the time, I'd say you really don't know who has good relationships with who, member to member, when it comes to this sort of thing. The tricky part to this is if Leader McConnell decides to stay and is able to stay in terms of the conference wants him to stay, other than the leader job, every other Republican leadership position from whip on down through conference chair, conference vice chair, and policy chair, they do have 6-year term limits. And they are, Senator Thune and Senator Barrasso are both coming up on their 6-year limit. So Senator Thune cannot stay as the whip, nor can Senator Barrasso stay as the conference chair, but he could elevate, he could become whip. He has not had that position yet. So it's kind of coming to a head in terms of what will happen with Senator Thune. So, or Senator McConnell, I should say. So I think the expectation is that there will be a leadership change, but candidly, that's been the expectation for the past 2 years, multiple different times, and it's not yet happened. So that leadership change or not change also impacts our key committees too. So that'll be interesting how that all plays out.
All right, so I'll flag for the audience, Senator Barrasso is our lead Republican on the Local Radio Freedom Act in the Senate. And because of their tenures and frankly, their rise to leadership, we also have great relationships with the other Johns, John Thune and John Cornyn, though they reflect more of their expertise at the Commerce Committee and Judiciary Committee. But Char, let me, because we're talking about committees, ask you, are there any major foreseeable Democratic changes at the top of key committees?
Great question. Democrats are pretty consistent, particularly I would say in the House and the Senate when it comes to committees. So right now, whoever you see as ranking member will be, if, for example, Democrats take back the House, Congressman Frank Pallone would now become chair again of Energy and Commerce, which he has been in prior years. On House Judiciary side, if Democrats take back control, you're going to see Jerry Nadler again from New York as the chair of House Judiciary. And then same goes on the Senate side. Currently right now, say Democrats do control the Senate, then you're going to see a maintenance of Maria Cantwell, Senator Cantwell being over Senate Commerce, and then also with Senator Durbin being over Senate Judiciary.
Jack, how about Republican committee leadership? You alluded to it earlier.
Yeah, on the House side, it'll stay roughly the same. Senator or Congressman Jordan still has time left as the ranking for House Judiciary Committee. I believe 2 years, just as Kathy Morris Rogers will still have time left. So if the House flips or it doesn't, she would stay on as the ranking member or the chair. And the House has different rules. They can serve for 6 years combined between ranking member and chair of the committee. Whereas flipping to the Senate has 12 years combined, 6 years of each ranking member or chairman spots, and chairman spots. So for instance, the Senate Commerce Committee, Senator Ted Cruz is there. He's just started his tenure as the ranking member of the Commerce Committee. So he has 4 years left as ranking member, or if it flips, he'll start his clock as the chairman. At the Senate Judiciary Committee, it's a little different because Senator Grassley, who has served all of his time as the chair, or as the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, actually has 2 years left to serve as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. So if it does flip, he potentially and would likely come back to be the chair again. And then Senator Lindsey Graham would move back over to the Budget Committee. There's a lot more moving chairs or musical chairs that happen in the Senate because they have different rules for that. And I'll just flag again that Senator John Thune still has 2 years as well to serve as the chairman of the Commerce Committee if he is not the leader of the Republican conference or still in Republican leadership as the 2 spot, which would take some other issues being addressed. So lots could happen on those kind of 2 core committees for us. And to Char's point, we also care about the Finance Committee and the Appropriations Committee, and those will also have some moving chairs. We'll have a new ranking member or chairman on the Republican side of the House side for Appropriations. Kay Granger is retiring, so there'll be somebody new in that spot. Ways and Means should stay the same for Republicans. The Tax Writing Committee, the Senator or Congressman Jason Smith. And just like the Finance Committee on the Senate side should also stay with Mike Crapo being the Republican there too. But a lot of this will start with a leadership election and kind of filter down and see when the music stops. So we were paying attention and actively engaged with our friends to make sure that we can be as perfectly situated for you all as we can be, no matter how the music, where we are when the music stops.
Mm-hmm.
Char, anything you want to add on further?
Yeah, I mean, Jack brought up a good point about, Ways and Means and also appropriations. Like I mentioned before, Democrats are going to be pretty consistent. So you're going to see, Rosa DeLauro still over appropriations. You're going to see Richie Neal still over Ways and Means. And the Senate is going to be maintaining the same side too.
So my kind of takeaway or my operating assumption is sort of regardless of how things turn out, we went through a lot of changes, but in the macro perspective here, these are not seismic changes that will happen either at leadership. I would put an asterisk next to House Republican leadership, or at these key committees. And the committees are composed and balanced in proportion to the overall ratios of the chamber. So because both are so closely divided, and unless there's again a major wave coming, there may not be the type of turnover at committees that we've seen in past elections where half the energy and commerce telecom subcommittee is brand new. I think there's going to be a decent amount of continuity here. So let's go into kind of 3 major scenarios that we can chart out and what it could mean for broadcast priorities. Char, let's start with if Democrats win everything, assuming President Biden is the nominee and wins, and then maintain control of the Senate and gain control of the House. What does that mean for top of mind, some key broadcast issues?
Absolutely. So if there is Democratic control both in the House and the Senate, For performance tax, we're definitely going to have to advocate for local radio freedom act as much as we can. One example in particular is the fact that if Jerry Nadler becomes chair again of the House Judiciary Committee, he has been a big proponent of the American Music Fairness Act. And so just like the threat that we face the previous congressional term, we could face that again in the instance that he is chair of judiciary. Now on our side that works is big tech when we talk about JCPA, because on the Senate side, you have a leader such as Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is leading the way when it comes to JCPA, and she knows how to run circles and work with her counterparts in the House. We just had a retirement of Congressman David Cicilline, who was the leader over JCPA for us on the House Judiciary side. So we have seen Congressman Lou Correa, who took over that antitrust subcommittee spot for Democrats. So he may be the person that's leading that. We're definitely going to see more information on cannabis, more movement on that, both from a House and a Senate side, particularly with what happens with Safe Banking Act. And then also when it comes to the diversity tax certificate, we'll hopefully be able to get a little bit more movement and work both with the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, and then also Senate Commerce and the House Energy and Commerce Committees.
And this is not a far too distant scenario, right? This was the first 2 years of President Biden's administration. And so we've lived through some of these exact threats and opportunities. Jack, what if there's united Republican control? What does that mean for broadcasters' agenda?
Yeah, so if all three levers are controlled by Republicans, I think there's definitely an opportunity to this slide's point on deregulation. I'd say specifically in the ownership space. There will be a new chairman, a much more probably pro-broadcast or at least pro-deregulation chairman of the FCC. So we've already been laying a lot of groundwork with the current FCC, and candidly, met with some sharp elbows. But there's a lot of information in the dockets that are already there that a new Republican administration will probably jump at, not just at the FCC, but also DOJ, sort of showing the power, the focus, the importance of local journalism, local broadcasting specifically. And they have seen and really, especially on the Republican side, really jumped up on the idea of big tech being not just overarching, but dominating in many different facets, especially with the rise of AI. So there will be some ability for us both legislatively as well as with the FCC and the DOJ to really push hard for some deregulation in the media ownership space. As well as to Sean's point, some of the Biden spending pieces, which could touch us. The in Deficit Reduction Act that was passed, the reconciliation package, is a lot of new money and new spend in there that a lot of Republicans would like to see pulled back. But candidly, I think that the big focus will be overarching, and if there is a unified Republican government, of really starting to try and just pull back a lot of the spending, a lot of the new regulations that have been pushed up these past 2 years or 3 years, as opposed to new ideas. That's probably not where they're going to start from, because honestly, there's not really much unification on the Republican side on what they would want to do uniformly, only what they want to undo uniformly.
And one thing that I guess is beyond sort of a policy issue, but a unified, Republican Washington, that is the type of atmosphere where you also see more M&A activity and hope for approvals through both the FCC and DOJ when it comes to broadcast-specific transactions.
It's true. And another thing I'd add to that, just because this is something that seemingly can unify or has unified Republicans in the past when they do have unified government, is the expiration of the TCJA, the Trump-era tax cuts, starts in 2025. And so if it's a divided government, which we'll get to in a second, that is a very tricky proposition on how they extend or not any of those expiring provisions. In a Republican environment where they control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, there will probably be a push to keep extending them, maybe tweaking them rolling back some of the new sort of tax pieces that were put in during the Biden administration too. But that it's always a focus of Republicans when they have a unified government is tax policy. And that will probably be issue number one out of the gate if that happens again.
Great point. Char, let's go to the divided government scenario. And I'm going to kind of ask you to do double duty of if it goes for anyone, but in general, this is what we're in right now, but what do you see as sort of the first 100-day focus type of work in a divided government?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, depending on what party has the White House, who's in control of the House or the Senate, it's going to be a big focus on administrative priorities. What are key priorities for the administration? For example, we saw with President Biden, his main priority was the infrastructure package. Whoever is in the White House, whatever their priority is probably going to be the main focus and more of that administration focus and action. Also, I think that there's going to be a huge focus on just nominations in general. So the spotlight is definitely going to be on Senate and confirming as many noms as there could be confirmed.
Great. All right, so Jack teed us up and started talking about tax policy. Mentioned the reconciliation process, which is a special budget process that allows essentially the party in power to defeat or evade filibuster and 60 vote threshold in the Senate. This is the mechanism by which the infrastructure law got passed, the Trump tax cuts that Jack mentioned, President Obama's healthcare plan previously. So this is a very powerful weapon and process when you have all the levers of power. And as Jack mentioned, you've got some of these Trump tax cuts. Some have already expired. Some really big ones will come up at the end of 24 and to 25. And not coincidentally, a number of the tax provisions that Democrats installed through the infrastructure package also come up. So I think tax and broadly the economy will be a major focus. And it's just going to really depend on what is that composition that gives rise to either things like journalism tax credits or diversity tax certificate versus maybe some additional tax savings. But in not any scenario on taxes, Jack, what's our bread and butter work at the NAB in defending?
Yeah, it's the do no harm mentality we have here, which is effectively the advertising deduction is sacred and cannot be touched. And we've been having pretty consistent meetings on that since the Trump tax cuts were passed, and obviously all through into the Trump tax cuts, just because it's one of those things we do not take for granted. It's been highlighted many different times over the years as a potential pay for. So we don't want to be on the table. We don't want that to be talked about. We don't want any changes to be done to how advertising is deducted. So it's when we talk to Ways and Means offices and finance offices, it's the thing we always lead with, which is this is something that is a normal operating everyday business expense and should be treated as such and shouldn't be tweaked for tax purposes and as a gimmick just to try and find somebody somewhere. So to Sean's point, there will be a lot of conversations about tax policy. They already are happening. The child tax credit expiration, the low income tax credit, multiple different pieces from the IRA, the deficit reduction and the DRA. And we always make a point of saying, as you address that, and feel free to address that, those are by and large good qualities and good tax policy to have. Don't sacrifice us in the process.
And then finally here, we've got a number of major priorities that either depend on our own advocacy success or marketplace developments, administrative action, or just more consensus in Washington. So just for completeness, the virtual MVPD issue, NAB has been advocating that the FCC refresh its record. Had Chair Cantwell from the Senate Commerce Committee raise this at nomination hearing over the summer, send a very strong letter to FCC Chair Rosenworcel urging her to do so. That has not yet been responded to, and Senator Lujan led a letter of himself and 19 other Senate Democrats complimenting that Cantwell letter, and again urging a refresh of the record. That has yet to happen. So I think a major fork in the road here is, where does Chair Rosenworcel go on this issue? And for the moment, it's hung up. So it's hard to sort of forecast that issue all the way into the new Congress without knowing what next major step might happen there. On AM, I intentionally left this down here as where will we be, because it's our goal to get this AM radio for every vehicle act enacted this Congress. We have incredible momentum. The bill that was introduced this Congress to ensure AM radio in all passenger motor vehicles as a federal motor vehicle safety standard, introduced sort of late spring, early summer, and by the end of July had already cleared the Senate Commerce Committee on a voice vote. There are 40 official Senate co-sponsors. Anyone from Pennsylvania, we just heard that Senator Bob Casey just agreed to co-sponsor. That happened since this call started. We have a number of Republican senators who've agreed to co-sponsor, but the bill authors, Senators Markey and Cruz, who are a bit of a political odd couple, see the wisdom of showcasing that this is not a partisan issue, that this is truly bipartisan, and they've been adding co-sponsors in one-on-one pairs, one Democrat, one Republican. So next week, I expect we'll be up to, or when we get back from Thanksgiving, 42 officially. We know we have more than 50 total senators supporting, a lot of momentum, a lot of appetite from Senators Markey and Cruz. We also have 182 co-sponsors to the House bill. And we spoke about Speaker Johnson. He is a co-sponsor of the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act. Before he was selected by his colleagues to be the new speaker, he was scheduled to have a fireside chat here in DC that was going to be policymaker facing in support of the legislation. So we have high hopes for what his speakership can mean for this issue. We're just going to keep pushing. Thank you for everyone who's participated in the Depend on AM campaign. I got my magnet there on my cup. Over 400,000 communications to Congress. So hopefully this one's done, and we're talking about having the rule implemented by NHTSA and not how do we get it over the finish line. Next gen transition, this is really at this point about the marketplace and how can broadcasters coordinate to launch as many markets as possible, cover as much of the population, work with the CE industry on getting more and more consumer options out there that have next-gen capability. We have a Future of Television initiative that we're working with the FCC that really is designed to flesh out any big questions, but create a record and a foundation for what we would hope would be an actual final transition from the 1.0 to 3.0 standard, and all of the benefits that would bring not just to broadcasters, but to our viewers. And then the final, more amorphous issue from my perspective, though it's so front and center in all of our consumer lives, is AI and the role that generative AI is having in our society. So NAB has been out front identifying, yes, broadcasters themselves will leverage this technology responsibly to gain efficiencies, but there are some risks here. Misinformation created by generative AI, whether intentionally or unintentionally, a scenario like fake Drake or fake, you could imagine Lester Holt announcing something about former President Donald Trump 2 days before the election, how that could impact the ballot box. And then, of course, similar to the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act, many of these AI models are using broadcast content, ingesting it, not only to train and develop more content, but without attribution, without permission, without compensation. So these are some major issues. NAB is going to be participating in the Senate AI forum at the end of this month, led by Senator Schumer. But there's a lot of discussion about AI. There's not a lot of obvious paths forward with how to particularly legislate around AI, but that could change quickly, and we're already in the mix on your behalf. Jack, Char, anything you want to add on other key issues or?
No, I think you covered the waterfront.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that, folks, is the end of our prepared presentation. And so we would welcome any questions to Ron, who asked to back it up to the toss-ups. I'm happy to send this deck to Sam, who can distribute it if you'd like any of this content at your fingertips. But put in the chat if you've got any questions. We're happy to take them.
Hey, Sean, really quick, can you touch on, obviously, a lot of the people on this call will be going to state leadership this year. What should we be preparing for between now and then? And what do you anticipate are kind of the main focuses there outside of maybe some of the ones you outlined already?
Yeah, so I think this is the menu, Sam. And we now have a few moving vehicles between now and the first week of March, a few legislative vehicles. We're going to need to do a National Defense Authorization Act, fund the military. That has always been achieved for, I don't know if one of my colleagues can check me here, but the last 20 plus years without fail. That's a vehicle. Maybe fairly difficult to add things on as exotic as AM radio or the JCPA, but that doesn't mean we're not going to try and really pursue that. And then Sam, Washington, frankly, is digesting the somewhat surprising passage of the so-called laddered CR, where you now have part of the government funding expiring in January, another part expiring in February. That clean-ish government funding package carried a 1-year extension of the Farm Bill, some expiring health programs, but not a lot else. So I think there's a lot to be written of what can happen, what can get done. Speaker McCarthy lost his speakership because he lacked confidence of, it may have just been at the end of the day, a very small majority of his conference, that he wasn't just going to lead into an end of the year package or one of these vehicles and create the so-called Christmas tree of riders. So I think, Sam, there's a huge test for new Speaker Johnson on the scope of the NDAA. Does that contain any additional riders as significant as the president's request for supplemental funding for both foreign and domestic policy? And then look, top of mind for us is, again, any opportunity for the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act. And then that will inform, what could happen on the government funding front in January, February. There's a bit of a backstop there where there's some automatic cuts if Congress can't enact something. I would expect that by early December, we will see, I think, some forward momentum, and what they hope was a top line agreement on funding levels that the appropriations committees can then work to. If we don't get that, the longer that lasts, the more likely it'll be that we're going to have another or multiple sort of showdowns. And then the question is, how and who can lead sort of out of those scenarios? So that's all going to happen before state leadership. I think issues like building up the Local Radio Freedom Act, even if at that moment we're hopefully over half of the House, every additional co-sponsor is meaningful, particularly if they're going to come back in the next Congress. Continuing to just build awareness of the marketplace realities that broadcasters are facing vis-a-vis big tech. I think that could really help us. As Char mentioned, there may be a JCPA introduced in the House. That's something that could also ride on a larger legislative vehicle between now and then. So I think those are the big issues. And again, hopefully we're thanking a lot of people for AM radio and getting that over the finish line rather than continuing to push and strategize for the next opportunity.
Excellent. Well, Sean, Char, Jack, thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it. We will circulate the deck and the video so you can watch on demand for those who attended. We look forward to seeing you guys soon. And thank you, NAB, for putting this together. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for having us, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.